Welcome to AMS Illuminations, the podcast where we explore the ideas, research, and trends shaping the future of marketing and academia. I'm Brad Carlson, and each episode gives us a chance to have real conversations with scholars and industry leaders who are pushing our field forward. We talk research, career insights, emerging trends, and occasionally challenge some of the assumptions shaping where marketing is headed next. And today, we're diving into a small, quiet topic that absolutely no one seems to be talking about right now: artificial intelligence. So naturally, we felt it deserved an entire episode. But this conversation goes beyond the usual AI headlines and productivity hacks. We're not here to debate whether ChatGPT can write better emails or help you finish your slides faster the night before class. We're talking about the much bigger questions. What happens when consumers increasingly outsource decisions to algorithms? How does AI reshape creativity and innovation? What happens when machines begin influencing identity, trust, and consumer well-being? And what role should marketing scholars play in helping organizations build AI systems that are actually human-centered? Today's episode is called The Human-Centered Algorithm: Marketing in the Age of AI. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Stefano Puntoni. Stefano is the Sebastian S. Kresge Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, where he also serves as co-director of the Wharton Human-Centered Technology Initiative. His research focuses on the intersection of technological innovation and human behavior, particularly automation, algorithmic decision-making, consumer identity, creativity, and the future of work. His work has appeared in many of the leading journals in our field, including the Journal of Consumer Research, Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Public Policy and Marketing, International Journal of Research and Marketing, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, and Harvard Business Review. Stefano, welcome to AMS Illuminations. Really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Brad. Great to be here. Thank you.
I want to start with the bigger framing of your work. A lot of the public conversation around AI is dominated by computer science, engineering, and technical capability. But you've argued that AI also needs to be understood as a social science issue. So what does this shift mean, and why is it so important for marketing scholars in particular?
Yeah, I think that this is basically one of the foundational assumptions in my research program, is to say that basically for many organizations, technology is becoming table stakes, almost like a commodity. Your ChatGPT is as good as mine, kind of. And what is going to make the difference is the way that we integrate it into processes, into products, that we basically blend the human expertise with these systems. And I think that's a social science question as much, if not more, of an engineering question. And then from the point of view of society, I think the impact that this technology is going to have on consumer well-being, on the functioning of markets, on economic growth, is going to depend on user adoption, it's going to depend on user experience, it's going to depend on the fair deployment of this technology. All of these questions touch upon social science. So I don't think that we can get this technology right if we have this single technical focus, but we need to have a comprehensive focus that also has to bring in the social sciences for sure.
I think that's a great starting point because it pushes us beyond the usual, what can the technology do question. So one line from your work that really stood out is the idea that AI is not just about automating the work we already do, but about automating work we aren't doing at all. Can you unpack that a little? What kind of new possibilities does that create for marketers, researchers, organizations?
Yeah, the background to that idea is that when you talk to organizations, you hear CEO pronouncements or see a lot of the kind of work that's been done, including academia. The focus has been so much on productivity. And what does that mean? Well, it means that basically you have a pot of work to be done, a set of tasks that need to be executed, and then we are thinking about the ways in which we can do the best. And by best, pick your criteria, but basically it's faster, cheaper, and hopefully also better. But essentially, you are thinking about the work that we're doing and how we can execute that better. Now, that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think certainly we ought to try to be as productive and as efficient as we can. I mean, this is actually a responsibility of business to allocate the capital as efficiently as possible. The problem that I find in those conversations that focus on productivity tends to dominate so much that it doesn't really leave a lot of oxygen for anything else. And in the end, this technology is only going to deliver the kind of promise that people expect it to deliver. And you just have to look at the kind of investments evaluations of these companies to think that this is going to have to be big. it can have that kind of impact only if we think beyond current tasks. The job shouldn't be to see what we're doing and doing it a little bit better, a little bit cheaper, maybe, without a lot of involvement from people. The implications for headcount reduction, all of that, this is what dominates the conversations around jobs and everything else. I think the big question is, what kind of innovation can we unlock? What kind of new product, new customer experiences, new customer relationships, new industries can be generated off the back of this technology? And that maybe means thinking about not automating what we're doing, but automating what we're not doing. Much harder. It takes imagination. It's a much harder task. It's going to take us a long time. It's not going to be, 18 months roadmap kind of thing that you see all companies aiming for. I think it's way beyond that.
Are consumers simply using AI as a better tool, or are we starting to see consumers become comfortable with AI making decisions for them? And when that happens, how should we think about it? As empowerment, as convenience, as loss of autonomy, manipulation, or some messy combination of all those?
My guess is that probably the answer is going to be contingent. And so you'll have different task contexts in which those agents are being deployed. Sometimes it's going to be very routine. So you can imagine an AI agent being a little more than a script in that sense. So if you go on Amazon and you have that current purchases for consumables, for example, it starts looking like that, meaning I told you that I ran out of shaving blades every 6 months. And the AI will basically make a note of that, and then it will ship it to me at the right time and then charge my credit card, and I don't have to do anything. It's a gray area, right? So it doesn't go from zero to fully agentic. It's all this process of deploying innovations in a way that support decision-making, make our life better and easier. But it's basically happening. And for those routine tasks, I don't think trust and delegation are going to necessarily be a very big issue, especially if you trust the e-commerce vendor that is going to handle the transaction and the payment. But imagine financial services, imagine healthcare, huge potential there for improving decision-making. Right now, basically, wealth advising is privilege that only the wealthy get, because for banks, there's just no margin that could justify putting an expert financial advisor in front of a random person. They all have massive bank accounts. And so it's a very unequal access to good financial advice that we have today. But what if we could develop agents that can provide good, if not very good, financial advice to everybody?
Well, so let's go ahead and make this more practical. So where do humans still clearly outperform AI in marketing today? And where do we think we're fighting battles that we've already lost?
I think my sense is that right now, if you are really an expert in almost every job, you do better than AI. And perhaps that will always be the case. Perhaps not. And maybe it will be the case in some domains, but not others. The reason why I got into this field, and actually, I realized this years later. Basically, I ended up in marketing because what I liked about it was a combination of left side and right side brain activities, so to speak, using a data metaphor. This idea that you have a lot of data, a lot of analytical kind of tools, but you also have the need to stand out, to be creative, be different, to be innovative. I don't think there are many disciplines where you have that same combination. Say finance, you don't want the creative part. I get scared when you have the creative accounting. Yeah, that gets you to jail. You don't want that.
Right.
So, but in other domains, it's all the other way. You lack maybe the formalistic, analytical kind of side. I think marketing is one of the few. Actually, I wanted to be an architect. Architecture is the same because it's kind of actually a bit close to engineering, but then, just not about building a box. It's about making it beautiful, enticing people want to live in. And I think marketing is a little bit like that. I think architecture is a good metaphor for marketing, actually. I think that because of that combination of analytical and creative, I think a lot of marketing jobs are actually quite difficult to replicate easily, whether that is coming up with an amazing brand that stands out and resonates, or create that campaign that really breaks through the clutter and gets people interested. But the truth is that a lot of marketing activities are pretty copy and paste. And I think for a lot of the stuff that we do, whether that is programmatic or emails or display, whatever, that is kind of, you'd expect AI not only to be able to do it, probably doing better. In the end, what AI can do is to interpolate data and make predictions based on past patterns. Probably can do that much better than a human can. So anything that looks like we should create a predictive machine to learn from the past to predict the future under some kind of stability assumption, why would you have a human do that? Obviously, AI should be better. But not all marketing is like that. In fact, the interesting bits of marketing are not like that.
Right.
It's about radical innovation. It's about changing the rules of the game. It's about standing out in a cluttered environment. You're not going to stand out in a cluttered environment by doing what you did yesterday. Right? Precisely the opposite. In fact, it might be that as AI gets deployed more and more, there is more room for a creative human to really move the needle a lot.
If algorithms are helping decide what we buy, what we watch, what we listen to, where we go, and maybe even how we present ourselves, what happens to consumers' sense of self?
Yeah, it's going to change. And I think technology is always one of the biggest drivers or changes in the way that we leverage material possessions and our context for identity work and purpose. And so that was the case in the past, is the case today, going to be the case in the future. And so that's nothing new. But I think what is interesting about AI is that it's asking us to answer some sometimes difficult questions. What the value of my professional expertise now AI can do this? Am I still really cooking when I have a machine that can do this? Lots of questions of that sort. And I think for me, the way to look at it is to say lots of research in marketing, academia, and practice is going to looking at what can AI do and what do consumers think about what AI can do. Equally interesting and important question is to think about how does AI changes the way that we think about ourselves, not what people think about AI, but how AI shapes what we think about ourselves. And I think there's lots of interesting questions there for interesting branding. And in a way, to me, it really brings it to the value of human labor. If you think about automation in companies, it's always a supply side decision. But if they're looking at the technology, they think of what it can do, they think of the status quo, how much it costs them to do something. And then it's basically a cost-benefit trade-off. Is it good enough? How much it costs? And I do a pull a trigger, yes or no. And I think maybe companies increasingly should think about the demand side and say, how does the presence of a human in this workflow, whether it's a service provision, it is customer service, or even product design and execution, what is the value of human labor in that workflow? And they might find that sometimes having a human there is actually adding value to the offering that is well kind of compensating for the additional cost that you may have to have when you have a human working a particular function. The question shouldn't be, can we automate it? But should we automate it? Does it make sense from a demand standpoint? Sometimes you'll say, you know what? That phone call from a real human to either apologize for that issue or to offer me this option or to reassure me about this concern is actually totally worth the cost.
Do you think we're moving from algorithm aversion to something more quiet, like dependence, where people may still distrust AI, but increasingly rely on it anyway?
I mean, I think you should give credit to people. They're not going to rely on something they don't trust unless they're basically in an algorithmic cage, so to speak, where they really don't have an option, which might happen. And that you experience every time that you're trying to talk to a customer service and there's no way you can speak to a person. There's only this chatbot. That's all you get. You might not be happy about it, but the only alternative is switching company, and sometimes you don't have that option. Certainly, I do think that there are situations where consumers engage with AI when they do not trust it. But more by and large, when they can do that engagement out of their own volition, they will give it the trust it deserves, so to speak, and recalibrate as they learn. I see trust as basically like a treadmill. You start, and then gets harder. Maybe can make you more inclined when you learn to try. You know what I mean? You basically it's an escalation of commitment in that sense. But there are domains where you might see dependence. Okay, and I think the one that maybe is most relevant to me is the context of AI companions and basically AI applications that are not designed to be a productivity tool, but just some kind of social bot, like either a friend or a partner. And in those situations, it's quite easy to see how people might develop dependency. I heard one example that was really shocking. I don't remember the company name now. It was basically an anecdote. I heard someone saying that there was a guy who was getting messages from, I started chatting with a girl on Instagram after a painful breakup. And they chat for months and she's fantastic and he really likes talking to her, but it has always been only online. And then at some point, she says to him, oh, I'm in London too for this event at the art gallery. Why don't you come and meet me there? And he was so excited to all his friends. We've got to change our plan. I have to go there. I have to meet her. And then after a while, when he said, yes, I'm coming, then a message saying, I'm an AI system. If you want to keep talking to me, you have to start paying $100 a month or something like that. Very dystopian. And so I think you're going to get examples like this where people are going to be basically subjected to some sort of emotional blackmail by, companies who don't care or don't understand what they're doing. And I think that's something that as marketing academics, we can try to document. So we can try to inform both company decisions and maybe also regulation.
That story that you shared, in addition to being frightening, gets us into creativity, which feels like one of the most interesting and uncomfortable areas right now. So you've written about different types of Gen AI use, including convergent versus divergent thinking. Can you explain that distinction and why that matters for marketing?
Yeah, it's similar to this distinction that people make often in management between exploration and exploitation. You basically you have a phase where you are considering broadly what option might be there, and then you basically have to make some kind of commitment to say, I'm going to pick on this and just trying to understand how you make it work and execute it. And I think it's a little bit like that. It's the same in the context of creativity. You basically can think about the creative process as a process that goes wide and narrow, wide and narrow. It's kind of think, okay, let me think of like a brainstorming thing would be more like come up with things and see what happens. And then, okay, which ones are the bad ones? It refers also to the topic of innovation. Typically, innovation is defined as new and useful. This is a standard definition in innovation management courses at many of us teach. Well, I mean, new is about generating instances of ideas, interventions, imagery, whatever it might be. That could be a good solution to a problem you face. But then the question becomes, is that piece of information any good? And so that's a useful component. Basically, AI can be valuable for both. I think that actually one of the most interesting areas of research around generative AI has been just how useful it can be in ideation. I don't know if you remember, but maybe a decade ago, when people were talking about what will AI never do, if jobs of the future for humans are going to be, it's always something to do with creativity and emotion. Turns out actually that AI can do a lot of stuff, related to both.
Right.
On the other hand, people are also thinking, anything cognitive analytical is going to be for machines only. And that's also not true. I think basically you have to think about what are the capabilities of systems, how are they architected, how are they engineered, and what room does it provide for humans to make a contribution. And my hope that in most domains, it's not going to be human or AI, but it's going to be some shape of human and AI. That will be my hope.
Yeah, and that's so I share that view, and I share with my students that I don't believe marketing jobs are going to be replaced by AI in the future. I believe that marketing jobs are going to be replaced with people who know how to use AI effectively. I think as we look forward, one of the things that's interesting in your work, you also touch a lot on the future of work. So what jobs in marketing do you think are generally vulnerable right now? And what human capabilities become more valuable as AI advances?
Yeah, I think that many marketing jobs are under pressure. They're under pressure in terms of their need for people to be performing, or simply under pressure in the sense that they have to change. Whether that is in the creative side, if you are creative nowadays, it is really a must that you learn to use tools like, I don't know, Flora or whatever that help you create workflows that benefit from both language and image generation. If you are in market research, same story. I think you have analytical tools that enable you to do things that would have taken much more time before. There are even questions about whether sometimes we can enrich, augment, or maybe even partially replace human-provided data with synthetic data. And I think there's some that's one very interesting area of research, actually. What does that mean for the established marketing services industry? I think there's going to be elements of the marketing services industry that is going to be lost because basically companies are going to bring it back in. Imagine the creative process. Before, as a brand manager, I might go to an agency, then I tell them my objectives, and basically I get to the agency to pitch me ideas, and I get them to narrow it down. Then I ask them to make some schematics and a prototype, and then eventually we decide go and do it. You could imagine a lot of that process being brought back into the firm, where now you go to the agency and say, this is basically a nicely already quite realistic executed copy of some sort, like a TV clip or something, and say, go and do it for real. And so only the last part now will be where you need more technical execution than the company would want.
If consumers are increasingly relying on AI agents to make purchases on their behalf, are brands still marketing to humans? Are we eventually marketing to algorithms?
I think one of the most interesting questions today for marketing academics is to explore the question, what is the future of branding? You could argue that basically the main effect of the deployment of personal agents is going to be commodifying markets. because basically the agent will be instructed on how to satisfy a need. That kind of customer need are going to be then translated into product specs. And then the agents will basically seek out the best fit given the specs required to fulfill the need of that particular customer in regard to price points and attributes and attribute levels and configuration. There's another view, which is maybe actually brands are going to be a moat, because if consumers are going to have a strong brand preference, they might actually query the agent to go find that brand and prevent competition from even having a go. Or maybe it's going to be more subtle. Maybe the brand is shaping how the consumer think about the category. And even though the consumer is not instructing the agent to find that brand, the way that the consumer thinks about the category is shaped by your branding. And the query will basically align with whatever you think you win on. So basically by shaping, we should think about this category around this attribute. Oh, that's my attribute. I don't know. I think it's going to be probably a combination. And there's going to be also areas where consumers love shopping and they're still not going to, say clothing. So some good people will basically say, I need the A and Y just finding, I don't want to spend any time on that. Other people just love exploring and trying things on and think about it and have creative style. But I mean, those people are not going to, you might benefit from AI support, but they're not going to give up that fun activity.
This has been an incredibly interesting conversation. I would love to keep it going, but I also want to be understanding and respectful of your time. So before we wrap, I do want to switch gears, do a quick lightning round, real quick. Biggest myth about AI in business?
Productivity should be the end goal. That it should be about doing what we're doing now cheaper instead of thinking about innovation.
What's one thing AI already does better than humans?
Lots of things. Everything that has to do with basically correlations.
A first AI tool or capability every marketing professor should understand?
I think today probably is coding agents.
Last question. Last time you personally used AI, what did you use it for?
Yesterday, I was, this afternoon, I have an executive session and I wanted to illustrate this idea that AI could help you explore a wider set of possible solutions. So I wanted to create a surface plot that had local optima and a global optima. And then I asked it to define what function that might look like, give some feedback, or the optima were all at the edges, I didn't like that, make it more in the middle, or make the maximum a bit bigger. So define the math function. Then I asked it to execute and make a beautiful visual I could use it on the slide. I mean, it would have taken me forever to do that, maybe with MATLAB or something, but it would have taken some time. We would have gone through calculus textbook and figured out what would be a good function. Very nice. It took me 2 minutes.
It definitely has value as long as we don't let it guide all the decision making. Stefano, this was fantastic. Thank you for helping us think about AI, not just as a technology story, but as a consumer, from organizational, ethical, and human stories as well. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for AMS Illuminations. If this conversation gave you something to think about or made you slightly more optimistic, skeptical, or professionally anxious about AI, share it with a colleague and follow AMS Illuminations for more conversations with the people shaping the future of marketing. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Brad.
We'll see you next time.